So I bought a $60 TEMU mini lathe. Now, I'd never been on TEMU before, but on a whim, I got on the website and looked up woodworking tools, and guess what I found? I found this mini lathe. Now, my expectations were low. In fact, I was a little bit surprised when I actually even received the package, given TEMU's reputation of being a little bit hinky. Is that a good word?
What does that mean, Vince? Hinky?
Oh, strange.
Weird. Why don't you say strange or weird? I mean, hinky, that has no meaning.
We say hinky.
But curiosity, as they say, killed the cat. So I pulled the trigger. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? I'm out $60 and I have a dead cat. So we're going to take a look at the packaging, quality, and performance and see if this little thing actually has any kind of role in a maker's shop. Now, spoiler alert, I did actually find one particular use for it, and if you've watched any of my recent videos, you might be able to figure out what it is. But more about that later. Let's go open it up. Now, in terms of packaging, I really wasn't expecting a lot, and that's pretty much what I got. It was packed well, but didn't have any kind of Kaizen foam like you'd find an X tool or anything packed with. Kind of a lightweight power supply. A couple of screws and a chuck key. Look more into that later on. And it came with a pack of 6 blades or whatever these things are called. They look really cheap, but we'll find out. Upon opening it up, it's just taped together with a little bit of packing tape. And there you go. Now, at first glance, it actually seems to be okay. There's nothing rattling around. There are no loose parts. There are no major calls for alarm, at least at first glance. It has plastic housing over the motor and also on the other end. I'm not exactly sure what that plastic housing on the left would be for. Now, the base that it's sitting on really does just look like a little simple piece of T-track, and it does look kind of short, so it's not like you could put any very long pieces on here. I wonder if it's even long enough to put something like a pin on there. All right, well, I've put off the inevitable long enough. Let's plug this bad boy on and turn it on and hope I don't lose an eye or a cat. Well, here it goes. And nothing happened. Actually works. It's quiet, relatively. The variable speed seems to work. It's actually kind of cool. You can make some music with it. Huh. Folks, this may actually be a decent piece of machinery. Now, it does show that it does have a 12-volt motor, 100-watt motor power, and goes 5 to 10,000 RPM. It does have variable speed on it. I should not be too close to the lathe. That's good to know. All right, so we're getting ready to give it a shot. Now, it does come with these 6 knives. They feel like they're made from some cheap wood. They're not plastic, but they are very small and cheap, as you would imagine. Again, $60 lathe. And with that, let's go ahead and put a piece of wood on here and give it a shot. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press this tailstock in, and this is where it gets kind of tough because that tailstock wiggles around quite a bit, and so it's hard to get it in the dead center. Even if you measure the other side and attach it to your chuck properly, it still can be tough to get this centered. And you'll see the results of that here in just a little while. I am going to use a mallet to try to pop it in there good so it holds it tight. This is definitely a shortcoming of this little piece of equipment. Now you'll also notice that the tool rest is adjustable. You can shift it around however you need to. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, but you can move it. This little piece of equipment is not attached to my tabletop in any way, shape, or form. If you're going to use something like this, you definitely want to screw it down or have it secured in some way. Just for testing purposes, I'm just going to use a couple of clamps, and that does hold it in place. And so far, so good. Hey, and just a friendly reminder, as always, if you're interested in this type of content, I would appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button down there. It really helps me out. Turn on notifications. And so with that, let's not kid ourselves. I'm not really going to create anything that looks great today. I just want to turn it on, test it out, and see how it performs. Also, having never used a lathe, I really don't know what speed it should be set to. So I'm just going to try it out and hope that I don't kill that cat. Okay, now that we've had a chance to try it out, let's talk about it. This is actually a pretty cool little tool, but it's got some serious drawbacks. Number one, if you want to move this forward or backward, you've got to keep it perfectly straight on your own because this is just held in with a couple of wing nuts. And it would be very easy to get it slightly cockeyed one way or the other, which could lead to results like you see right here, where it barely cut on one side, but then it went extremely deep on the other. Now, the other reason for this is that I probably did not get that dead center on either side. In fact, I can see on this side that I did not get it dead center, which would lead to those results. So I'm going to take probably 90% of the blame for that. However, knowing that it's so easy for this side to get cockeyed, I'm going to put about 10% of the blame on this. Next, you can only work with stock that's about 2 inches in diameter because from the center of the chuck to the base, you've only got slightly over 1 inch. And that's 2 inches. If you're working with a square piece of stock, that's 2 inches from corner to corner because as it rotates, the square pieces, the corner pieces will hit that base. So if you're working with dowels that are already round, you can go approximately 2 inches. If it's a square piece of stock, it's going to be significantly less. Next, this is only about 5.5 inches right here. Now, if you were able to get yourself a longer piece of T-track like this, you could take it off of this base and put it on something longer, but I wonder how it would perform on that. And I don't have a piece of T-track like this to test it on. I do have one of these pieces of T-track, but the tracks are in different widths, and I couldn't just simply move it over to this. So what do I really think of it? Number one, actually, in terms of quality, it's kind of impressive. I didn't expect something like this to come from TEMU, which, to be honest, kind of has a reputation of cheap products. It's not that bad. Now, the power supply seems really cheap. I bet you if I were to drop it on the floor, it feels like it would break. But the lathe itself actually feels fairly substantial. The motor actually seems to be very well made. But this piece right here, I don't like that. I don't like the fact that it's so free to move and get off track. Now, how would I actually use this in my shop? I will keep it, but I'll keep it for one very specific purpose. If you've watched any of the previous videos that I've done where I've used dowels to assemble the jewelry box or a coat rack, I often run into a problem where the dowel is slightly too thick for the holes that I bore, and I need to sand them down a little bit. So I could easily see taking a dowel and putting it on here and then just using it to sand that dowel down to a slightly smaller thickness and do it in a nice, even fashion. So that is a situation where I really think that this would come in handy. Okay, so there you go. It actually did a really good job of sanding this dowel down, and let's see if it actually took anything off of it. And what do you know? It actually did take a little bit of the thickness off of it. So it does seem to do a pretty handy job of being able to sand down a dowel if you need that. And oddly enough, that's something that I do fairly often in my shop with some of the small projects that I do. So in my situation, this could actually come in handy for that purpose, but probably just that purpose. I couldn't see myself actually trying to turn a pen or a bowl or anything like that. I want to get into lathe work, but I wouldn't use something like this. So if it's worth spending 40 to 60 bucks to give you something that will help you buff or sand dowels or some of these smaller pieces, it's a kind of a handy tool. But outside of that, I really don't see how this is going to come in handy in most makers' shops, especially woodworkers. Well, so with that, I hope you've enjoyed this piece of content. It was meant to be something that was kind of outside the norm, something a little bit fun and creative that you don't see every day. And if you enjoyed this piece of content, then make sure you click on this video right here, which will show you some of my favorite small projects created from scrap wood.